Friendships don't eliminate pain or fear, but they give us the courage to face them. You don't need 100 friends to change your life. Sometimes one person who truly sees you is enough. When we think about the problems we face in life, whether it's stress at work, financial uncertainty, or even the quiet battles of self-doubt, we often search for solutions in systems, strategies, or personal achievements. We tell ourselves that if we just work harder, earn more, or plan better, then somehow things will fall into place. But when you strip everything down to the core of what it means to be human, the real solution almost always comes back to something far more fundamental: connection. The truth is, friendships are not some additional luxury we get to enjoy when life is going well. They are the very foundation of our well-being, and without them, no amount of success or achievement can make us feel whole.
Think back to the earliest stages of human history. Survival wasn't a solo pursuit. Our ancestors hunted in groups, protected one another from threats, and relied on shared trust to ensure the survival of their families and communities. Alone, one person would not stand a chance against the harshness of the environment, predators, or even the challenges of finding food and shelter. But together, they could build fires, create shelter, divide roles, and pass down knowledge. From the very beginning, our brains and bodies were designed for connection. The instinct to bond and form relationships is not a choice, it's biology. Our nervous system, our psychology, even the release of chemicals like oxytocin, all reinforce the idea that we are wired to belong with others.
This need for connection doesn't fade as the world advances. It's as true today as it was thousands of years ago. The difference now is that we sometimes convince ourselves we don't need it. We celebrate independence, glorify the idea of being self-made, and admire the ones who pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. But the reality is no one gets anywhere alone. Even the most successful individuals you can think of were shaped, influenced, or supported by people around them. Mentors, partners, or friends. Behind every achievement, there are relationships that gave someone the courage to keep going when the weight of life felt too heavy. It's easy to underestimate this when you're in the middle of chasing goals or solving problems. You might tell yourself that friendships are nice, but not essential. You'll call your friend after the big presentation, after the promotion, after you fix the mess you're in, but this mindset misses the point. Friendships are not the reward at the end of the journey. They are the support that makes the journey possible in the first place. When you hit a wall, it isn't your resume that pulls you back up. It's the people who remind you why you started in the first place. When you feel the sting of failure, it isn't your bank account that soothes your heart. It's the friend who sits with you in silence, reminding you that you're not defined by one moment.
We live in a time when loneliness has become an epidemic. Studies show that people feel more connected digitally than ever before, yet more isolated emotionally than any other generation. And loneliness doesn't just make us sad, it makes us sick. It increases stress levels, weakens the immune system, and shortens life expectancy. That's how deeply our bodies are tied to connection. We can't thrive without it. Friendships are not just about laughing together on a Saturday night or sharing memories. They are literally a part of what keeps us alive.
And when we look at the problems we face, whether it's depression, burnout, or the anxiety of living in a fast-paced competitive world, it's easy to see them as personal failures. We think, I'm not strong enough, or I should be able to handle this on my own. But what if the real problem is not that we're weak, but that we're disconnected? What if the solution is not more grit, but more people? That changes the story entirely. Because then the path forward isn't about proving ourselves in isolation, but about leaning into the very thing that makes us human, our capacity to build bonds of trust and care. Imagine a life where you had no one to share it with. Not the celebrations, not the struggles, not even the ordinary little moments that make up the fabric of a day. The truth is, without friendships, the highs would feel hollow and the lows would feel unbearable. A milestone only feels real when someone else witnesses it. A setback only feels manageable when someone else says, I've been there and I'm still here with you. That's the power of human connection. It takes the weight of existence and spreads it across shoulders so no one has to carry it all alone.
When you understand friendships as the foundation of human connection, you start to see them differently. They're not just people you happen to spend time with. They're the anchor in the chaos, the shelter in the storm, and the reminder that life is not a solo performance, but a shared journey. And suddenly, many of the problems that once seemed overwhelming no longer feel impossible, because you're not facing them in isolation, you're facing them together.
There's something powerful about standing in front of a mirror. The reflection doesn't lie. It shows the wrinkles, the scars, the smiles, and the tiredness in our eyes. But even the clearest mirror only reveals part of who we are. It shows the outside, the surface, the image we project to the world. What it cannot reflect is the depth of our character, the blind spots we carry, and the potential we haven't yet tapped into. For that, we need another kind of mirror, the mirror that only a true friend can provide. Friendships are not just about companionship or shared experiences. At their core, they are about reflection. They reflect back to us, not just what we want to see, but also the truths we may be avoiding. A real friend will celebrate your strengths and achievements. Yes, but they will also point out when you are drifting from your values, when your pride is getting in the way, or when you are settling for less than you're capable of. In that sense, friends shape us not by changing who we are, but by helping us to truly see ourselves.
Think about a time in your life when you were at your best. Chances are someone was there reminding you of your worth, nudging you to take that leap, encouraging you to believe in yourself when you doubted. That's the mirror of friendship in action. It reflects back a version of yourself that you might have lost sight of. And in the same way, think about a time when you were off track, when your decisions weren't aligned with who you really are. A real friend doesn't just smile and nod during those moments. They call you out, gently but firmly, not to judge you, but to bring you back to yourself. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it is also invaluable.
The fascinating thing about these mirrors we call friends is that they reflect us differently than we reflect ourselves. Left on our own, we tend to live in extremes. We might be overly critical, focusing only on our flaws, believing we're not good enough, or we swing the other way, blinded by our pride, convinced we don't need anyone else. Both are distorted reflections. Friends bring balance to that distortion. They remind us of our strengths when we're too harsh on ourselves, and they ground us when we're too high on our own ego. In this way, friendships keep us aligned with reality, not the version we imagine, but the version that truly exists.
This role of reflection becomes especially critical when we face personal struggles. It's in those times of confusion or despair that our vision of ourselves becomes most clouded. We start to believe lies that fear whispers to us, that we're alone, that we're not capable, that we don't matter, and in that fog we can't always find our way back. But a friend steps in with a mirror and says, look, this is who you really are. I see your strength, I see your kindness, I see your courage, even if you can't see it right now. That reflection is often the spark that reignites our own belief in ourselves.
And it isn't just about the hard times. Friends also magnify joy. They show us the best parts of ourselves when we achieve something meaningful. Without that reflection, success can feel oddly empty. Imagine achieving a goal and having no one to share it with. It's like shouting into a void. But when a friend is there to cheer with us, to say, I knew you could do it, it validates the effort and makes the moment real. That reflection adds depth to our experiences.
It's also important to recognize that these mirrors of friendship aren't always flattering, and that's a good thing. A true friend will sometimes hold up a reflection that makes us uncomfortable, because it shows us the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. Maybe it's a pattern of self-sabotage, or the way we've been ignoring someone we care about, or even just the truth that we're capable of more than we're allowing ourselves to attempt. That discomfort is not criticism, it's growth. A friend who reflects the truth is saying, I care about you enough to show you what you might not want to see, because I know you can handle it. And this is where friendships differ from casual connections. Acquaintances or colleagues might only show you the polished version of yourself, the one you project in public. But friends see the unfiltered version. They see you when you're frustrated, when you're exhausted, when you're vulnerable. And still, they reflect back a picture of someone who is worthy, someone who has value, someone who is capable of more than the moment suggests. That kind of reflection cannot be faked, and it cannot be replaced.
We often underestimate just how much of who we become is shaped by the mirrors around us. If you surround yourself with people who only reflect cynicism, negativity, or apathy, over time, you will start to absorb that image. If you surround yourself with friends who reflect honesty, courage, and compassion, then those qualities begin to define you more deeply. The mirrors we choose shape the person we ultimately become.
So friendships are not just about comfort or laughter or even support. They are about transformation. They are the mirrors that reveal both our current selves and our potential selves. They show us not only where we are, but also who we can grow into. And in a world that constantly bombards us with distorted reflections, from social media filters to cultural expectations, having friends who show us the truth is not just helpful, it is essential. Loneliness is one of those experiences that doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it's obvious. The quiet apartment after a long day, the empty chair at the dinner table, the silence when you wish someone would call. But often loneliness creeps in more subtly. You can be surrounded by people working in a crowded office, attending social events, even scrolling endlessly through social media feeds, and still feel like you are completely on your own. That is the paradox of our modern world. The more connected we seem, the more disconnected we actually feel. And when loneliness settles in, it doesn't just affect our emotions, it reshapes how we see ourselves, how we face challenges, and how we interpret the world. This is where friendships become more than just pleasant additions to life. They become antidotes, powerful, necessary, life-giving antidotes to the loneliness and fear that so often magnify our problems. Fear thrives in isolation. When you're by yourself, your mind has no guardrails.
A single worry can grow into a catastrophe. One failure can become a story of permanent defeat. One anxious thought can spiral into a loop that feels impossible to escape. Left unchecked, fear expands, becoming larger and louder until it drowns out reason. But bring a friend into the picture and something remarkable happens. The same fear that felt overwhelming when carried alone suddenly feels smaller. It's not that the problem disappears, but the burden does not feel as heavy when shared. A friend provides perspective, sometimes simply by listening, sometimes by reminding us of our own resilience, and sometimes by just being present. That presence itself is enough to remind us that we are not as alone as we think we are.
There's a reason why some of our darkest moments feel unbearable when no one knows about them, but begin to lose their sting the moment we share them with someone we trust. Loneliness exaggerates pain, while connection alleviates it. Neuroscience even shows this to be true. Our brains release oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals that soothe stress and create feelings of safety when we are with people we trust. In other words, friendships don't just feel good, they literally rewire our bodies to cope better with stress and fear. Think about the times when you were terrified of taking a leap, whether it was starting a new job, moving to a new place, or confronting a personal challenge. Alone, those moments feel paralyzing, but when you had a friend by your side, urging you forward, believing in you, sometimes even holding your hand as you stepped into the unknown, the fear didn't feel quite so impossible. That is the medicine of friendship. It doesn't erase fear, but it transforms it into something manageable. Instead of fear being a wall that stops you, it becomes a hurdle you believe you can overcome, because you know someone will be there on the other side with you. And it's not just fear of external challenges often. Our deepest fears are internal. Fear of not being enough. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure. These are the fears that live in silence, the ones we rarely voice aloud, yet when we bring them into the light of a trusted friendship, they lose much of their power. A friend who looks you in the eye and says, "You are enough," even when you don't believe it, can dismantle years of self-doubt in ways no motivational quote ever could. Because when it comes from someone who truly knows you, the good, the bad, the vulnerable, it resonates as truth, not just reassurance. This is why friendships are such a critical antidote to loneliness. Loneliness convinces us that no one understands, that we are cut off, that our struggles are ours alone. Friendships prove the opposite. They remind us that someone does understand, that someone has walked through fear too, and that we don't have to carry everything in silence. They create spaces where we are allowed to be imperfect, uncertain, and afraid, without judgment. And that acceptance is what gives us the courage to keep moving forward.
Consider the image of a child learning to ride a bicycle. Alone, the child wobbles, falls, and becomes scared to try again. But with a parent or a friend running alongside, holding the seat, encouraging every attempt, the fear is replaced with trust. Eventually the child learns to ride, but what stays with them more than the skill is the memory of not being alone in the learning. Adults are no different. Life often feels like a series of bikes we've never ridden before, and fear of falling is always present. But with a friend beside us, we try anyway. That companionship doesn't just help us succeed, it helps us face the attempt in the first place.
What's more, friendships not only counter loneliness and fear, but they also create hope. Fear shrinks the world, telling us that the future is bleak and the present is unsafe. But friends expand our vision, reminding us of possibilities we can't see when we're stuck in our own minds. They offer hope by lending us their perspective, by sharing their strength when ours runs out, and by reminding us that tomorrow is worth walking toward, even if today feels heavy. That hope is perhaps the greatest antidote of all, because it pushes back against the darkness of despair.
It's worth noting that this antidote isn't about quantity. You don't need dozens of friends to combat loneliness and fear. One genuine, trusting friendship can change everything. One person who listens, who cares, who stands beside you, that is often enough to shift the tide of your internal battles. It isn't the crowd that heals, it's the depth of connection. So when we talk about friendships as solutions to problems, it isn't just about having fun or creating memories. It's about survival of the soul. It's about recognizing that loneliness is not simply the absence of people, but the absence of connection, and that fear is not simply a reaction to danger, but a signal amplified by isolation. Friendships step into both spaces, silencing the lies of loneliness and quieting the roar of fear, reminding us that we were never meant to face life alone. Life has a way of testing us in ways we never expect. Struggles appear without warning. A sudden loss, a failed opportunity, a heartbreak, or the slow grind of responsibilities that weigh heavier with each passing day. These challenges often make us feel small, fragile, or powerless. Alone, a burden can feel unbearable, stretching us to our limits and convincing us that we are not strong enough. Yet when a struggle is shared, it transforms. The same weight that once crushed us becomes lighter. Not because it has changed in size, but because we are no longer carrying it alone. This is the quiet but extraordinary power of friendship. It turns struggles into sources of strength, weaving resilience not from the absence of pain, but from the presence of people who refuse to let us face it in isolation.
When we struggle in isolation, the mind begins to distort reality. We start to believe we are the only ones going through it, the only ones who feel this kind of pain, the only ones who cannot figure it out. That illusion of uniqueness deepens the suffering. But when we open up to a friend, suddenly the walls crack. We discover that others have walked similar paths, felt similar fears, and faced similar heartbreaks. That recognition does not erase the pain, but it does something equally powerful. It makes us feel less alone inside it. A friend saying, "I understand," or even "I've been there too," doesn't solve the problem, but it restores perspective. It reminds us that struggle is part of the human condition, and surviving it together creates strength that isolation could never produce. Think about some of the strongest bonds you've ever witnessed. They rarely come from moments of perfection. More often than not, they are forged in fire. Soldiers who have faced battles together, families who have endured crises, or friends who have supported each other through illness, failure, or loss, all of them emerge with bonds that cannot be broken because they were strengthened under pressure. Shared struggle creates something deeper than companionship. It creates trust, intimacy, and loyalty. It creates the kind of strength that says, if we made it through that, we can make it through anything.
Even in smaller everyday struggles, the same principle applies. Think about the workplace. Projects that are difficult, deadlines that feel impossible, and challenges that seem overwhelming can quickly drain motivation when faced alone. But when people come together, when colleagues become friends who share not just the work but also the frustrations and triumphs, the same struggle can become energizing. Late nights in the office don't just produce fatigue, they produce stories. The bond of "we did this together" makes even the hardest challenges meaningful. That is the strength of shared struggle. It transforms drudgery into camaraderie and obstacles into opportunities for connection.
There is also a deeper psychological transformation at play here. Struggles, when faced alone, often define us negatively. We start to see ourselves as victims, as unlucky, as incapable. But when faced with friends, struggles become chapters in a shared story. They become narratives of resilience. A person who says, "I survived," carries one kind of strength. But a group of friends who say, "We survived," carry another. A collective strength that reinforces each individual's confidence. Each one borrows courage from the others, and in return lends courage back. The cycle of giving and receiving strength turns the struggle into something that strengthens everyone involved. Another important truth about shared struggles is that they often bring out the parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. Alone, we may crumble, but when we see a friend depending on us, something awakens. We discover reserves of compassion, patience, and resilience we may never have tapped into otherwise. In helping others through their struggles, we strengthen ourselves. The act of carrying someone else's burden makes us realize that we are stronger than we thought, and that strength remains with us long after the struggle has passed. There's a saying that joy shared is doubled and sorrow shared is halved. Friendships embody this principle in ways that statistics and logic cannot measure. Shared joy creates celebration, but shared struggle creates transformation. It builds bonds that joy alone cannot forge, because it requires vulnerability, honesty, and sacrifice. When you let someone see you at your weakest and they stay, the trust that is born from that experience becomes unshakable. And when you stay for them in their weakness, you are not just offering support, you are participating in the creation of mutual strength. History itself reflects this truth. Communities that have endured famine, war, or displacement emerge with cultural bonds that are rooted in shared struggle. They tell stories of survival. They honor traditions born in hardship, and they pass down lessons of resilience. On a smaller scale, our friendships are no different. Every inside joke born from a hard moment, every memory of remember when things were tough and we made it through, becomes part of the shared identity of that friendship. Over time, those shared experiences accumulate into a deep well of collective strength that cannot be replicated by anything else. It's also important to note that sharing struggles does not mean fixing them for each other. Friends don't always have the answers, and they don't need to. The strength comes not from solving the problem, but from showing up in it. It comes from the quiet act of sitting together in pain, of carrying silence together, of refusing to walk away when things are messy. In a culture obsessed with solutions, it's easy to forget that sometimes the most powerful thing a friend can do is simply be there. Shoulder to shoulder, saying without words, you don't have to go through this by yourself. That presence alone creates the kind of strength that isolation never could.
The beauty of shared struggle is that it leaves behind something lasting. Problems eventually pass, situations change, and pain often softens with time. But the strength built through facing them together remains. Years later, friends will look back and realize that the struggle that once felt unbearable became the very thing that solidified their bond and proved their resilience. They don't just remember the difficulty, they remember the laughter that broke through in the middle of the tears, the small victories that felt monumental when celebrated together, and the sense of us that was built in the process. That shared us is the real strength, the foundation that carries them into the future and gives them courage for whatever comes next. At the heart of every human being lies a deep, undeniable longing, the desire to belong. From the earliest days of childhood, we search for signs that we are accepted, valued, and part of something bigger than ourselves. We look for it in families, in schools, in communities, and in the circles of friends we gather along the way. Belonging is not a luxury. It is a fundamental human need. Without it, even the most successful achievements feel hollow. And with it, even the heaviest struggles feel lighter. Friendships are the purest and most powerful form of belonging because they are chosen, unlike family which we are born into, or institutions which we are often assigned to. Friendships represent the people who looked at us with all our flaws and imperfections, and still said, "You matter to me. You are part of my life." That simple act of inclusion is transformative, and it is often the solution to problems we thought had no answer. Belonging has an extraordinary effect on the human spirit. When we feel we truly belong, something shifts inside us. The constant need to prove ourselves begins to fade. The pressure to wear masks, to pretend, to hide our insecurities starts to loosen its grip. Belonging gives us permission to be ourselves. Unapologetically, it creates a safe space where we don't have to fear judgment, where our laughter can be loud, our tears can be messy, and our doubts can be spoken without shame. That freedom to be authentic is what allows us to heal from wounds we didn't even realize were weighing us down. In a world that constantly asks us to perform, friendships give us the rare gift of simply being. Many of our personal problems, whether they're feelings of inadequacy, anxiety about the future, or the quiet pain of loneliness, are rooted in disconnection. We feel lost because we believe we are navigating life on our own. But belonging interrupts that narrative. A friend's presence whispers, "You are not alone here. You are part of something bigger than yourself." That reassurance is not just comforting, it's powerful. It changes how we approach challenges. A difficult job feels less daunting when we know someone has our back. A heartbreak feels less shattering when someone is sitting with us in the aftermath. A dream feels more achievable when someone is standing beside us, believing in us even when we don't. Belonging doesn't erase the obstacles, but it gives us the strength to move through them. What makes friendships so unique in creating belonging is that they are not bound by obligation, but by choice. Friends don't have to stay, they choose to stay. And when someone chooses to stand beside us, not because they have to, but because they want to, it deepens our sense of worth. It tells us that we are lovable, that we are seen, that we matter, that knowledge seeps into the deepest corners of our hearts and begins to silence the doubts that tell us otherwise. A single voice of belonging from a true friend can be louder than 100 voices of criticism from the outside world. Belonging also expands our vision of ourselves. When a friend says, "You belong here," it doesn't just affirm who we are, it invites us to grow. Belonging doesn't mean sameness. It doesn't ask us to shrink to fit in. Instead, it encourages us to bring our whole selves to the table. A circle of friends is strongest when each person brings their unique strengths, perspectives, and quirks. That diversity of presence creates an environment where everyone grows, because everyone contributes something that makes the whole stronger. True belonging is not about losing individuality. It's about embracing individuality within a shared bond. When you think about the times you felt most alive, most seen, most secure, chances are they involve belonging to a group or friendship that accepted you completely. Those moments stay with us because they touch something deeper than happiness. They touch identity. They remind us that we are not just individuals floating through life, but parts of a greater web of connection. Friendships embody that truth in the most tangible way. They weave us into networks of care and meaning, where our presence matters and our absence is felt. That kind of belonging answers questions we often don't say out loud. Do I matter? Am I enough? Will someone miss me if I'm gone? And friendships, time and again, provide a resounding yes.
The absence of belonging, on the other hand, is one of the most painful experiences a person can endure. Disconnection breeds loneliness, isolation, and despair. When people feel they don't belong, they withdraw, they silence themselves, they shrink their dreams. But the moment someone reaches out in friendship, extends a hand, offers a place to belong, everything begins to change. Belonging is the soil in which hope grows. It creates the conditions for courage, for resilience, for joy. Without it, problems multiply. With it, problems become challenges we can face together. The power of belonging also lies in its ability to transcend circumstances. Life will always bring moments of chaos, uncertainty, and difficulty. But when you belong to a circle of friends who remind you that you're not walking alone, the storm doesn't feel as destructive. Belonging anchors you in the middle of the chaos. It's the assurance that even if the world outside is unstable, there are people who are steady, who are with you, who will not let go. That anchor doesn't stop the storm, but it gives you the confidence to stand through it. At its core, belonging is not about fitting in, but about being embraced as you are. And friendships are the place where that happens most authentically. They are the proof that our worth is not determined by achievements, appearances, or performance. They show us that worth is simply being human and being willing to share life with others. In every smile, every late-night conversation, every shared silence, friendships whisper the truth we all need to hear. You are not alone, you are valued, and you belong. When we step back and look at the role friendships play in our lives, it becomes clear that they are not just nice to have, they are essential to who we are and how we navigate the world. Friendships are the foundation of human connection, reminding us that we were never meant to survive or succeed alone. They act as mirrors, showing us both the truth of who we are and the potential of who we can become. They are the antidote to loneliness and fear, shrinking the shadows that grow larger in isolation. They transform struggles into strength by turning individual battles into shared stories of resilience. And above all, they give us the gift of belonging, the assurance that we matter, that we are seen, and that we are not walking through life by ourselves. So many of the problems we face, anxiety, self-doubt, burnout, despair, are amplified when we try to carry them in isolation. But when friendships enter the picture, those same problems begin to lose their grip. Connection restores perspective, presence provides courage, belonging gives us hope. At the deepest level, friendships remind us of something we often forget in the rush of life, that we are stronger, braver, and more capable not because of what we achieve alone, but because of who we walk with along the way.